Good evening. I'll call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Clark. Here. David. Here. Fish. Here. Jorgensen. Here. Call. Here. Parliament.
Here be opposed.
And Mayor Heinitz.
Here. Welcome to everyone. Tonight, we really only have the one agenda item. And first thing I really need to do then is to approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. And again, it is covering the continued discussion on the annexation of the ground on Redwood and Boulevard and Chestnut. And before we certainly are willing to listen to new comments if there are. I think in light of that, I would like, first of all, for the council to share any thoughts, any questions that they might have. And I've taken quite a bit of time to look through this, and it's been an interesting experience to look at this and find out exactly how the process is for annexation. It's sort of interesting. One of the first weeks I was mayor, I went to a meeting of mayors, and the question each of us was to answer is basically what's your biggest challenge right now? And I brought up the fact that we're looking at a forced annexation, as it's called, and they said, oh, you don't want to do that. And I've learned that I've learned a lot since then. But I'm going to give you my opinion of this whole situation. And I've looked at it, I think, first of all, as I stated last time, it started with the school district's desire to build a school on the east side of Sioux Falls. And I think Dr. Larson did a good job of explaining the position that the school district has. I don't think there's any question that it's a good area for a school. I think it would be well received. It would give them the opportunity to do some different things with Valley Springs, et cetera. So at this point in time, we look at annexation. And I've looked at this from your side and from the city side, and I've come to the conclusion that this is a very difficult annexation for us to go through. I think we are all understanding of the fact that the cost associated with developed ground to annex this would be prohibitive. I saw some numbers, $200,000, $300,000. Well, I know all of us are hopefully getting by okay, but we can't fathom that kind of cost. And so for you as people that have developed properties, and that's pretty much all of Redwood, all the way out, and on the west side of Chestnut, there's no hope to recoup some of the costs that you would have for the annexation to happen. The assessments are too much. And yet the developable land on the east side of Chestnut and so on, where the school actually would be, there's some opportunity there for people to recoup their costs. So then I look at it from a city standpoint. Can the city fathom the cost of doing this on their own? And quite frankly, and I am learning more and more about the finances of the city. And I look at this, could they do it? Yeah, I suppose you could pass a bond issue, take up all the cost yourself, and those types of things. But it would be at the expense of all of the other projects that have been planned. Council did a wonderful job a year ago of putting together a capital improvement plan. And that plan is in place. I've seen some of the work already. Some of your longtime residents, if you drive some of the streets in the core area, the improvement that they've made, it's on pace. Rushmore, Sylvan, all of the different things that are, and they have they've got a good 10-year plan of things. And so I look at this, that if the city were to do this, you pretty much can forget doing anything else. We don't have that kind of funds to do it. So I personally am at a point where I would not be in favor of the annexation from the standpoint of the citizens and from the standpoint of the city. So that leaves us then with the school. And I will ask Brian here in just a minute. My understanding is that the water and sewer could be provided to this property regardless of whether or not it was in the city. And I'm assuming at some point in time that the developable land around that school would be able to put in infrastructure that would allow them to develop that land and, you know, the costs and so on of the, it would not be a forced annexation, it would be people asking to be annexed into the city. And if in fact we can provide water and sewer, I think that's what we need to be able to do. Then I come down to the roads. I'm concerned about the roads and whether or not the township can take on because I think, you know, whether they're bumping and all this and that, that's not great, but it is what it is. But safety and kids going to school and riding bikes and walking on sidewalks, those things concern me a great deal. So can the township provide the streets? Not sure. Can the township assess the people that live on that side to pay for improvements of the streets? Not sure. Those are all things that will have to be answered by somebody other than the city. I do believe that we have never, in my estimation, and I've only been with these folks 8 months, have never felt that they were out to put a burden on the taxpayers of this city. I don't believe that. They've been very fiscally responsible in all of the things they do with the funding. We squabble over dollars a lot of different times, so I don't think that they've been out to make life miserable for the people in that area. And I believe now is the time for us to look at this as, yes, it would be nice to have, but it's not something that we can afford to do at this point in time. So with that, I'm going to ask each of you to ask questions. Brian, the first question I have is, can the city provide water and sewer with another direction?
Water is installed already in Redwood and Chestnut. That is looped. That was done a number of years ago. Sanitary sewer has been looked at for a number of years, extending up from Augusta, going north. And that's all, we refer to that as the east side trunk. We've talked about that for a number of years. You know, it's partially designed now, just waiting for property owners to initiate completion of that and then bid it out. So it would need some cooperation from some of the adjacent property owners between the city limits and the school and or TB&J's property to get that installed.
But it would be doable, in your estimation. Yes. Okay. Well, Tim, I'm going to call on you first for any questions or comments that you'd like to make.
Well, I don't know if I have any more questions because I've had most of them answered. I actually last week talked to several school officials, and they basically indicated that whether we annex the property or not, the school will be built where they bought property. We can provide the services to them through the property that we already have. You know, when we as a city tend to build arterial streets, it's normally with land that has developable property on either side of it. And what ends up happening is the developer ends up paying for part of the arterial street, the city pays for part of the arterial street, the costs then get spread out amongst a bunch of lots that have not been bought yet. And with property that already exists, it's very hard for me to put that burden back on those property owners that have already bought property that never intended on having this happen. You know, I liken the special assessments. To me, I've been in retail for 25 years and I have never paid a dime of sales tax. The state could make sales tax 20%. I wouldn't care because I've never paid it. The person who buys the product is the one who pays the sales tax. That's just the way it works. So when it comes to special assessment, if it's empty dirt that has potential to spread the costs over lots of properties, then that seems like a good idea. it doesn't seem like a good idea to concentrate it on properties that don't have that opportunity. Let's put it that way. So I guess I would be against the annexation simply because I don't see where the city really benefits from doing it.
Thank you, Tim. Mr. Cole?
You said many of the things that were on my mind also. One question that I would have as far as getting if we wanted the school property to be in the city, and as I look at this map here with the various property owners, I see number 38 and 36. You have to have, it has to be contiguous, correct?
Has to touch.
And so if we worked with the property owner of at 38 and 36, I think that's listed as a Bosch property. And then we could bring in 35. Is that something that's been thought about, or as far as at least bringing those properties into the city if agreeable?
Yeah, the properties labeled 36 and 37 would need to be annexed along with the school property in order to bring the school property into the city limits.
Well, 37 is down here. On mine, it's 38 and 36 up at the top.
38 would need to be annexed. 38 would not need to be annexed. It'd be 36 and 37 over on the east side that Tony Bosch owns. That is currently floodplain that would need to be annexed to bring it up to the school property.
Okay, maybe we're looking at two different maps and saying the same thing.
38 is this parcel. 36 and 37 are these two.
Okay, on mine, it's at 38. So we're talking about the same
Yeah,
property.
these two parcels would need to be annexed to bring it up to the school property to make it contiguous.
Okay. There again, I looked at the cost of the road. You know, even if we did annex in, I think a lot of the property, a lot of the annex values, because it's not going to increase the value of a lot of those properties that are out there. And so those would be decreased. My understanding is that portion of those would then be assumed by the city. Total road projection right now is 8.3 million. And the city's share of that as it stood right now is 4.3 million. I think that would go up from there, and we've got all these projects that are going on, the core, the Rushmore, and we would have to give up something in order to get that accomplished. So much of what the mayor said, much of what Tim said is pretty much where I'm at on, and I am not for, as proposed, I am not for continuing on this annexation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cole. Dana, let's kind of go down. We'll come back.
Do you want to finish the voice?
And we can do that. Jack?
Jack, are you there?
Do you have any questions or comments?
I'm going to hold my questions to the end here, I believe.
Okay.
I'll step in and I did send you that email. Sent an email to Brian asking clarification from the attorney for the Ironwood residents. And
We're not on Ironwood, we're on annexation.
This is just a,
you know, I'm of the mind that this project needs to be done. However, the cost that we put into it and put onto it on our own dime is very high. day one on this. I'd like to see some kind of a cost sharing, formula developed. I'm not sure what that is or is to be. If someone has an idea, I'm all ears. Any thoughts on that, people?
So Jack, are you on annexation or are you talking about Ironwood?
No, annexation.
Okay.
I believe what Jack is talking about, if there's a way that, like, I think like Olive's up here, you look at what Seacock put together, which is a nice report, but the prices, just like an Ironwood, way out there, right? Like, none of us agree with those dollar amounts. But I think what he's talking about, is there a way that we could, think outside the box, maybe look at what other communities have done? Is there a way that we could cost share in regards to county, township, city, school district? Is there something that can be done where, to alleviate the cost and the fiscal responsibilities so it's not on the residents? I think, is that what you're talking about, Jack?
Yes, absolutely.
So I think the township doesn't have a lot of money, from my understanding. They have limits on what they can tax, so to speak, the residents, and it's $2 a front foot is the max. There's some other little things for ambulance and fire and other things, but they have some maxes on what they can go up to for front footage assessments. The county, Tammy and Brian may be able to speak to this, but the county is working on Park Maple. I don't know that Redwood or Chestnut is at all on its radar. I've never heard that the county is willing to put money forth towards either of those two projects. It's something you certainly ask, but it's never been in anything that I've seen over the course of the last 10 years in terms of county funding. Doesn't mean you can't ask, but I haven't seen anything.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Dana?
Yeah, I have quite a few questions, and I will mimic what some comments have already stated, that I think it's across the board that we all feel that the amounts of assessments is just too high. Does that mean we shouldn't annex? I don't know. But I agree with Vicki, figuring out some other way. So I guess I had interest in learning more about potentially phasing this project, possible deferments, using some fund balance. Do we have more COVID money coming? I mean, the safety concern on that road, we had that email today that I only had a chance to skim, but it talked about the traffic, both foot traffic and traffic increasing significantly. I mean, that's a concern, and I don't know if anybody's from the township that can help us understand what that's going to look like, because we've got 10,000 people potentially that are going to use that road. With that being said, with 10,000 people using that road, I do feel like the city should bear more of the expense, kind of like what we did with Ironwood, and we incorporated Aspen Park into the bigger picture of things. I feel like the city should be incorporated into the bigger picture of things. I had funding questions too with the school, county. I had questions on how it would affect our growth plan to the east. I think it said that there could be some complications or delays, like for the construction that would be scheduled to go in conjunction with the school. And I don't know what kind of delays that would cause, or how that would impair our city's growth. I was looking for some clarification on how the folks with existing livestock, how that works, how taxes would work if they remain agricultural. I have a lot of questions. I guess I didn't know I was going to just ramble them all off, but that's a majority of them. I'll keep looking here.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think I'll have more questions than answers.
Yeah.
However, I'm not not ready to just kick the can down the road either.
Well, I think the idea of phased annexation is being somewhat looked at by bringing the facilities in through what I would call the southeast portion, and I think by doing that, that area around the school will eventually be annexed into the city. And I think those people will want to be annexed into the city, and I think at that point in time, that will take care of itself. I think, again, I'd like to stay focused here on, do we want to annex all of this area into the city at this point in time? That's the question we're trying to answer tonight. Councilwoman.
So I had a question about the TAP grant. Tammy, we applied for a TAP grant for the shared use path along Redwood and got it, so it's $400,000. That's a big priority for Park Board. What happens if we don't build that road?
I think it is going to be pretty difficult for us to put in that shared use path if we don't build a road, mostly because of drainage. I know I'm not saying that it's impossible, but it'll probably raise the cost of it. And then if we come back in and then put the road in, then we're trying to retrofit that sidewalk to fit again. And, you know, then it's not in our jurisdiction either. So we would have to, I don't know how well DOT will look at that as far as transferring that to the township, or if township's even interested in us doing that. Plus, we'd be spending taxpayer dollars outside of city limits.
So I would anticipate that if we don't annex, that road at some point is going to have to be paved. I mean, and I'm not sure what that time frame is. So I'm just wondering, you know, as Jack said, are we kicking the can down the road? I think that's a very good question to ask. I'm concerned about that. Will this in any way limit TB&J's development?
It could. Like I said, there's water on Chestnut already. Sanitary sewer could come up following that small creek to the east of on the east side of the annexation area. Could it delay TB&J's development of that property? It certainly could, I would think. You know, for a rural subdivision outside of our city limits, it's within our plating jurisdiction, we would certainly take a critical look at how that would impact us in the future. It's going to increase demand, and then, you know, we're going to be looking at annexation down the road again of a potentially developed subdivision, and we're going to be in the same boat. And that's why rural subdivisions are somewhat difficult to deal with when they're on the edges of towns.
So we had $2.8 million in the CIP for this road project. Of course, the costs have gone up dramatically, but if we didn't build the road or do the annexation, what could we do with that $2.8 million?
It could certainly be reprioritized to a different project. You know, it's a little early at this point in time, because as we look at the CIP, which we're going to review in February, once we get final numbers in for budget, I can't tell you for sure what exactly that could be used for, but it could certainly be refocused elsewhere.
So in your analysis, Brian, let's say we bore the brunt of the $8.3 million. Mm-hmm. Can we even cash flow it?
Well, you know, looking at some numbers, we'd be looking at debt service on the $8 million included Chestnut Trail and the other street. So
The school would do that, right? The trail?
well, no, the $8 million that's included in the study includes Chestnut Trail and Oak Hill Circle. So if we back those two out and we're just looking at Redwood and Chestnut, it's about $6.6 million for just Redwood and Chestnut. That would increase our debt service, if you went on a 10-year bond, $420,000 a year. 15-year bond would be $300,000 a year. So that would be a pretty significant impact to our cash flow. Could we cash flow? Yes, but it would certainly delay other projects that we already have in the capital improvement plan.
And that gives me heartburn, as the mayor said, that gives me a lot of heartburn. Does it go against our debt service?
If it's a special assessment bond, it does not.
So
If
that's
it's-
good.
If it's a sales tax bond, it does, or a GO bond, it does.
So, in my mind, I'm still on the fence because I can see pros and cons of both ways. But
Are we expecting any more COVID money?
COVID money would not be, the road construction costs would not be an eligible cost for COVID.
But money that would be for ARPA, that was allocated, if we got some, then would free up money that we could then in return, if it freed up from another project, right? If it had to go for like water or sewer, right?
Conceivably, you know, we talked about the west side trunk at the last meeting. We've designated that ARPA funds, the 1.8 million that we currently have designated for us to go to that. The 600 million that the state is getting for this next go-around of ARPA, I think we would be eligible for a 10 million, roughly. We would have to come up with 30 million in projects, which we have. It's just a matter of cash flowing those. The restrictions that the state, at least from the proposed restrictions that we've seen at the state, the ARPA funds aren't going to be able to solve much of our issues.
I went to a
They're fairly
meeting,
restrictive.
I went to a meeting week ago on the ARPA funds, and I think you need to be very careful there. To Brian's point, yeah, you can get 10 million, but it's gonna cost you 20 in the meantime to use the 10. And
And for these projects, Chestnut and Redwood, the only thing that would be ARPA eligible would be the east side trunk sanitary system. That'd be it. Water's already in.
Okay, so questions I have would be, I know we have this study here, but we don't necessarily, I mean, do you have to annex every single property?
No,
So we can kind of, I mean, basically what we're discussing tonight is whether or not we feel the annexation, it's a need for the city. And then my understanding, then all the meetings after that would be whether or not certain properties and/or costs, all that stuff associated is all the stuff that we'd figure out in a whole bunch of other meetings after tonight.
yeah, there's a number of steps in the annexation process, including a resolution of intent to annex, where you would describe the actual properties you were looking at annexing.
Okay?
And then there's the actual resolution of annexation, which would describe those properties. So you can move in and out any of the properties that are included in the study.
Yeah, because one could argue there is a good part of them that use city streets to get to and from their house every day that should have been annexed years ago. And because this is where I know it's been said before too, where past councils just kick the can down further down the road, that it should have happened beforehand. And so that's what I fear when looking at this, is that one, like we said, I don't think any of us agree with the amount of assessments. But then I, read closely over the 2035 comprehensive plan, and it even says on 11 and 12, arterial and collector streets, Barb and Tim, you signed off on this. This was something that you guys did back in 2014, that it is a future road, Chestnut, a future road will become a minor arterial as development proceeds. Access to the road must be limited to maintain the free flow of traffic. And then Redwood Boulevard, the same thing, is it's an urban section east of Split Rock Creek, bridge to Chestnut Boulevard. In the future, Redwood has great potential to be an arterial route linking the east and west sections of town. So I feel like this was done 7 years ago. The school district bought land 12 years ago. So this is, I feel like maybe we didn't do enough to be proactive in our approach. And now we're trying to be reactive. And I get, again, I don't like the assessments amount or anything like that. I truly believe, though, we have a great staff, we have a great administration, and we have counselors that are willing to do what we can, that I feel like there's a way that we can at least try to come up with a possibility, not just throw our hands up and say, oh, well, we can't do it. We have 11,000 residents, and I would say probably utilize that more than these residents out here, that road. And I feel like it's irresponsible as a city to pass that on to the township to try to maintain that gravel road. I live out in that area, and I know, speaking with a lot of my neighbors, a of course, they don't want people to be assessed, but they like the idea of having that connectivity to the city. I mean, I think about even the fire trucks, that's a straight shot down if there was ever an emergency. And then just reading through the growth plan, I mean, there's a whole bunch of development. I mean, at one time, obviously, I don't think it will be, but this comprehension plan has the corner of Chestnut and Redwood zoned commercial industrial, possible future land use. So I don't know what has changed, and Tim and Barb, you're on this, so I don't know what has changed, because the school's still going in. There's housing, which I don't know where else in the city that we would have housing to go into, because I believe, Brian, is there 80 acres out there?
TB&J owns 80 acres. I don't think that all 80 of it is developable.
Okay.
Some of it is floodplain. There's a hill kind of towards the east side. You know, looking at it, scale it off on the county website, you're looking at maybe 48, 50 acres
Okay.
on that hilltop.
And the other thing I like is something that we've been in the CIP meetings and we've been talking about as a city. We've been talking about a community room. We've been talking about we need gym space. I don't know if anybody else caught that with Dr. Larson's sheet that he gave us. That's something they're looking at putting into the new school. And I just feel like it kind of checks off some of those boxes that we've been wanting for our residents. And I feel like having a safe route, yeah, we could just leave it gravel, but I would say that, yeah, this Brandon was Brandon, but the growth of Brandon's really due to their school district and the great reputation. And I feel like we're going to have parents then saying, why are we going on gravel road and those buses and I don't know. So those are just things I think about going into it. But again, like I don't like everything with the study. I don't like the cost. I don't like, you know, I hope we can figure out some kind of use or something for everyone.
I ask a piggyback question off of what Vicki was just asking about. So with the 80 acres, potentially how many homes would that be and what kind of revenue would that?
Typically, rule of thumb is 3 dwelling units per acre.
And then revenue?
You know, I think the average new construction in town is probably around 350,000 for a single-family dwelling. No, all of it. Property tax, so.
We only get 20%.
Yeah, we get, you know, our tax rate is about 3.5 mils. So you're looking at about $1,200 per dwelling unit for the city taxes.
Tim?
Well, now I got distracted, but hold on. So to address Vicky's point, I must have signed off on that as P and Z member?
You are.
Yeah, okay. When you do a future land use map, you're guessing at where the city's going to grow and what it's going to need as it grows. Those future land use maps are not cemented, they're not in stone. They are an idea of what they potentially could look like. And yes, the corner would be zoned commercial because we believe in buffering corners of arterials with commercial, so you don't build residential on corners of arterial streets. So all of that's true, and annexation was something that would have to be dealt with even then. The city has a hard time building streets outside of their jurisdiction. The other thing that to look at, and I had mentioned this to Jared when I talked to him the other day, you know, our costs that we are proposing are for city designed streets. We design arterial roads at a certain level. There's curb and gutter, there's storm sewer, there's a county street does not have to be to the same level that a city street has to be built. I mean, they can choose to do it completely differently than we would, and probably to a much cheaper cost than what we would build an arterial city street. Now, would that be something for the township to work on? Yeah, because it's a township road. Maybe they could get together with the school district and figure something out. If the school really wants paved roads, they would have to work with the township and the county to figure that out. But, you know, we're going to build an arterial street to what we design, and those are expensive. So if you're looking for cost savings, there's your cost savings. But that would not include us annexing those properties because we couldn't be involved with it. Also, the Ironwood thing, that is already in city limits. Last time I checked, that's why we're getting involved with that. This, it's not part of the city. It just isn't, so.
I think it's also interesting to note that my belief is that we can't just annex in the roads and leave the properties on either side of them out of the city. Is that?
I don't think it's advisable. You're incurring all of the costs with none of the adjacent property owners to generate revenue to even maintain the roads, plow them, fix them, patch them, et cetera.
So, moving forward on this, I think I'm somewhat encouraged by the fact that the school is still looking at building the school there, and I think that's a good thing. I do believe that, I firmly believe that this will, in terms of annexation, will take care of itself if in fact and when that happens. I believe that the developable land around there will get developed. And I believe those costs will be incurred by the developers on the lots, and that the stress of cost is not going to be on the present landowners, nor is it going to just be on the city. And I think those are the two things I'm most concerned about. I don't want to see the landowners be burdened, nor do I want to see the city be burdened and take away all of the different other projects that are going on. I would say that after a decision is made on the annexation, that a meeting of the school board, the township, the city, and possibly the landowners of that side would be very appropriate to see what can we do? Where do we go from here? What can we find in shared costs and move? I don't like the thought of, well, let's just forget about it and do nothing. That's not what we're here to do either. So I do believe that long term, there's some time and that we could move this project forward, but from a little bit different standpoint than what we are right now.
But I would challenge you on that, Mayor, in the respect that if we anticipate assessing Ironwood, those properties, there's several properties there that are not going to be developable. And then here we're saying we don't charge, but there we do. So we have to be careful with that, I think.
Well, I think we're here tonight just to talk about this.
Okay, but
And
we
I
could
hear
set a
what you're saying.
precedent. We could set a precedent.
Some of the costs incurred in this particular are much different than that. And are the benefits gained? And I think part of it, Barb, comes from the fact that I believe on Ironwood, the city is gaining a lot. I think having an entrance and exit into that park, other than what we have right now, is very big. I don't believe that I don't know that annexing this area of Chestnut, especially the present area, I'm talking about the present area, I don't know what benefit it is to those folks. Maybe it'd be nice to have a paved road instead of bouncing around, but at this point, they seem to be happy with their road, they seem to be happy with their water and sewer, and that's what they would like to see.
And again, I'm not saying I'm in favor of annexation. I'm just saying that Tim and I have sat at lots and lots of P&Z meetings, and we're always very cognizant of setting precedent. So that's where I'm coming from.
Sure.
I believe when you look at those properties on Ironwood, as we've talked in here several times and Brian has told us, when it comes to the special assessment process, this is step one. Step two is for every person to come in, sort of like when the county assesses their property taxes, we have a meeting once a year. People who think that they were assessed too much come in, they tell us that they were assessed too much, and we decide whether or not, well, we don't, the county actually decides whether they get to lower their assessed value or not. So we get to go through that process with Ironwood. So the properties that maybe don't stand to benefit, we have the option at that point to say, you're right, we don't think you benefit as much. So I mean, that's only a first step as far as I know. I could be wrong. I've never annexed property before, and I've never special assessed property before, so I'm learning along the way with you. There was something else that I wanted to talk about, but I guess that took precedence. Oh, well.
I have a question. What happens then if we don't accept the study and annexation, and let's say 2 years from now, or 3 years, the school is up, and that council's like, okay, yeah, we need to build a road or whatever. So then the whole study goes all over again, and it takes a year, and then,
Yeah, I'll chime in on that too, Jack. It seems like we're, again, kicking the can a little bit here. I'd like to try, at least, to move forward with some sort of action. Not handling it indefinitely, but being able to move forward somehow. I think we can come to some sort of a compromise on some of these properties in the Redwood area. I would hope that we can. So that's my two thoughts, two cents worth.
Brian, I have a quick question. If we decide, like, let's say we pass the annexation study, and we look into it, because there's a lot of meetings, but don't we have the right at any time saying, okay, yeah, this is, ideal world, I would love to be like I said, I'll win the lottery, and then all this will be a moot point, and you know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, like, yeah, right? Here, if I win, but I'm just saying, like, if we do really look into it, because right now, we just have a lot of these large numbers, which none of us agree with, we think it's outrageous, but if we actually look in deeper and really try to think outside the box and see, and we still realize, yeah, it's not feasible, can we just like stop at any moment?
There's no obligation if you accept the annexation study. There's no obligation to continue. There's a number of steps in here where the city council can say, no, we're not going to proceed. For instance, once the annexation study is submitted and accepted, you're not approving it, you're just accepting it. The next step is to a resolution of intent, where you look at if you want to revise the properties to be annexed. There's one that the city council say, you know what, we're not going to approve the resolution of intent. And then there's another one where you actually have the resolution of annexation. So there's another step that the city can say, nope, we're not going to proceed, we're done. Getting back to your original question regarding in a couple years, I think that there would be enough changes out there that a new annexation study would be called for. Too much would have changed. The school would have been built. We'd have actual numbers, you know, as far as traffic counts or if houses were starting to be built. It wouldn't be such a gray area.
As the mayor said, I think that this is going to take, and I believe I kind of alluded to it at the last meeting, this is going to take a natural course. You know, I worked in Sioux Falls for 30 years, and when I started working there, Orchard Heights was not a part of Sioux Falls. Didn't want to necessarily be a part of Sioux Falls. They had horses back there. It would have impacted their ability to have the horses. But as the development around it continued, the writing was on the wall, and eventually Orchard Heights was brought in. Some of the properties kept their horses until such time as the property was sold. They had land that they could develop, and so they sold off parcels, and Orchard Heights is what it is today. It'll take that natural course. This area is going to fill in eventually, and that's going to probably drive the issue much more than the school. We have a number of people here. How many people live on Redwood or live on Chestnut in those developments? Okay, if the city paid the whole bill, built the road, annexed you in, but didn't lay any of the cost of that road on you, but all the other provisions would apply, how many of you would want to be a part of the city? There's kind of a hand.
Can I pose a question? There's more than just the street costs, there's the sewer costs?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
We convert from our septic systems running out back, if we're supposed to go to a sewer system
Yeah, that's why we got engineers. But that's the, you're complicating the question. The question was very, very simple.
My personal, the total cost is zero to me, that's just me, you know?
Yeah.
I would have to say no. One, I don't want to be forced with the city water. The second thing is, we all know there's 25% tax increase going into the city. I don't want to pay that. I feel like right now, I've been living here for 15 years, and I've got no really big benefit from the city. And now they want to assess me for it. I don't find that reasonable.
Okay.
I guess that's part of me, and I still want to hunt. I want my kids to be able to go hunt my property. And I don't want the city telling me I can't do that. I bought it for that specific reason.
So my question was answered by the lack of hands.
Mine also is with water, but it's the fact that we own the acreage on the south side of Redwood and the farm on the north side of Redwood. So we have 20 acres and we bought it a year ago. We want to get cattle, but they have to be watered, we don't have a well. There's a granite bed, you can't dig a well over there. And that's $60,000 for a new well. So everybody, including Chelsea Nelson, she has the horse stable, the Ellisons, we all water off of rural water. So you're looking at, and I talked to Tammy about this, you're trying to feed and water livestock with city rates of water. That'll break you. I mean, that's pointless to even having livestock or horses.
So you would be a no also?
I would be a no also, but I mean, just like, these are just areas that, like, I've talked to Tammy for a while about just areas that really the study didn't touch upon, you know, the increased water rates, burning, you can't burn, right, in the city limits? And I mean, I have literally a giant house of trees I have to burn, from all the pines that died, you know, so that would be, we're an acreage out there, we have 20 acres. That's, when you want to have the ability to burn, we can't burn everything in the so.
I would also,
Can you tell me the numbers of your little poll?
0.
Okay.
So I did some math, according to what Brian said. So the potential property tax income for the 240 houses would be $288,000 a year in property tax. That would probably take 20 years to build out? Maybe?
Well, I don't know.
10, even if it took 10 years to build out. So we're going to spend $8 million building a road and pay for it with $280,000 a year when we already said that our cash flow impact would be $420. So, I mean, we don't have the money. Unless we assess everybody, we simply don't have the money to pay for it.
Growth, the point was more about the growth. It wasn't just flat property taxes. I mean, hopefully we would also, from that population, gain sales tax and employees and other things that would be beneficial for the city too. I was more interested in the broad picture than just flat property tax.
The other thing, my understanding with some of these annexations is that they don't have to hook up to our water or sewer, or, I mean, there's a lot, or you could even keep it, if it's agriculture, at the township levy for taxes, am I correct? Like, there's, I mean, and those are options along the way, it's not like it's a done deal.
Can we ask staff to answer that?
Typically, what the city has done in the past, if you have your own well or your own septic system, we don't require you to hook up to city services until such time as those systems fail. And we've got a number of wells in town, we've got a number of septic systems in town that are still operational. So we do have an agreement with MCWC about taking over water service within Annex territory. We need to review that and make sure what those requirements are.
What about the taxes?
The taxes, cities can set up a rural services district. We don't have one in place right at the moment because we don't have any involuntary annexations. With that, the city council would need to determine what level of service, because if someone has a lower tax, the theory behind it is you're not going to tax somebody at the city tax rate if they're not receiving all of the city services. So the question becomes what city services will be delayed or not offered to the folks in the annexation area to justify the rural services tax district.
How does it work with people that have livestock currently?
As long as they're in there on day one, they would be considered a non-conforming use. We don't allow animals in the ag zone, and everything out there would be zoned ag right at the moment until further designation. But as long as there's an animal on the property, it'd be considered a non-conforming use, grandfathered in essence, and can stay there as long as an animal is there. And the animal would have, or an animal would have to be off the property for more than 6 months in order to lose the grandfathered status.
What about my breeding cattle? What about, does that limit you, if, like, since you're on the horse farm facility, she had 20 horses this month, 12, 6 months from now?
We don't count the number of animals.
And it also changes like whether I'm working steers on the horses, or if I have goats at the time.
We don't,
Have them, sometimes I don't, it depends on what I am using or training those horses for at any given moment.
I would think that at this point in time, if there's an animal on the property, it's grandfathered in, regardless of the number.
Are you talking about specific number of animals, or when one dies, that's one less?
No, no, the animal, all animals would have to be removed from the property for more than 6 months in order to lose the grandfathered status. So if you had 20 animals and an animal died, it doesn't make any difference. You still have animals on the property. We don't look at the number of animals, at least we haven't. We don't go out and count chickens or sheep or cows or anything.
When we built, we had to sign a paper saying, you know, there might be like horsemen around your property or whatever, because they're in the township. And, yeah, so now what if all these people, you know, suddenly are complaining about manure and things like that, is that gonna stay the same?
It wouldn't bother us. As long as the animal's on the property on day one of annexation, the animals can stay there.
I think
If you're
we're,
gonna do a live, also to feed your livestock,
That's different than just having, if you didn't have a feeder livestock, I mean, we're not talking about that. We're not talking about changing your 20 cattle into 2,000 cattle. I mean, that's completely different, and then you have zoning issues anyway with the county, so I don't
I
want
think-
to, yeah, I
I
don't
think we're
want
getting
people to have a
into-
false representation that you can't change anything, because if you went to that type of a thing, then you have a county zoning thing issue too, so.
I think we're getting into questions that would need to be answered if this passes. And, I think, to me, this comes down to two things. One, do we think it's equitable and fair to assess the people that are in that area, yes or no? And do we feel that the city can afford to do this alone, yes or no? Those are the two things I'm trying to answer. And if that's what you have to, as a council, decide.
My last two thoughts are just, one, I understand all the concerns, and then trying to also think of 11,000 residents that, for some reason, they're not here tonight, but I'm trying to think what's best for the growth of Brandon. And part of me would be like, if we don't have a true understanding, because I think we all agree the amount of numbers and the assessment isn't going to work for us, even some of the tweaks that we were just talking about, right? Then I go back to, why did we even do the study if we're not going to at least try to give it a good look through? Because right, Brian, we can say, nope, like a month from now, we can say, yeah, these numbers are too high, we're not going to do that, we don't want that. But at least we can do our due diligence, so to speak, and tell the residents, we looked at that. We can't afford it, or there's just too many things, because we want to work with the residents that are there, that they can keep their livestock, they can stay on their water. I don't know, I just feel like we're just throwing our hands up before we even made an honest try of things. Because then I go back, Dave, then why did we even start this a year ago and do a study if we weren't going to try to at least see it through a little bit?
Okay. I've got absolutely nothing against doing the study. Taking a look at it, seeing where we're at and what it's all about and what the costs are and what the ramifications are, the impact on people that live out there. I have read the study, I've read it a few times. I've read through the state laws as they apply. I've listened to the residents out there, and like I say, it's not kicking the can down the road, but the can will reappear at some point. I mean, would you agree with that? This will be something that, as the city grows, that will continually take a look at those roads at the infrastructure, what can be done, what should be done, what can be worked out. This is just not the time. We don't have the school is going to move ahead, from what I understand, the answers that I got. That seemed to be the driving force for us to take a look at this time. They are happy with, they get 300 feet to their entrance, and they're happy with that. Jared, the superintendent, said that. They'd like paved up to that Chestnut Trail that would go back into the school. The school building out there is not predicated on us annexing this in and improving these roads. They will move ahead regardless. We can talk about this ad nauseum. Nothing is going to change with the study. Nothing is going to change with, the only thing that's going to change is the costs for the city are going to continue. And we've got a number, you talk about the 11,000 people that we have in town, we've got another number of projects right now that are impacting many of those 11,000 people. We've got to stay focused on the core, getting that developed. We have to stay focused on Rushmore and getting those projects done. Water treatment plant, everything that's going on, we've got a lot on our plate. And if you want to take some of that stuff off the plate in order to move ahead on this, I don't want to. I think that we've done that. They don't want us to. I can appreciate that. They also, I'm sure, are realists, and they realize that as the city grows, they will be the Orchard Heights of Brandon eventually. And eventually, more than likely, you may be looking at some sort of annexation into the city. I don't know. I don't have that crystal ball to say this will happen or that'll happen. If the township comes into a pot of gold somewhere, you know, with the what the federal government's been doing as far as infrastructure, then maybe the township can improve those roads, working with the school district, and that can happen, which would be a lot cheaper cost, and then that would answer those issues. A lot of this land can still be developed without this forced annexation.
So Mayor, this was a work session today, correct? And it will be on the agenda Monday, is that the plan, or?
So I guess that's up to you as a council. If you
It is. Really, at this point in time, the only thing the council needs to take action on theoretically is accepting the study or not. After that, it's, you know, the next step would be the intent, the resolution of intent, and that could be done at any point in time.
So what's the disadvantage of just accepting the study? That doesn't commit us to anything,
No, it
does it?
doesn't. Accepting the study doesn't commit you to anything. Like I said earlier, if you want to take a look in a couple of years, again, as the school grows, I would highly recommend another study.
So can I ask a couple more quick questions? Tammy, we haven't heard much from you. I know 2 briefing meetings ago, I believe you said that there would be some safety concerns, but I don't think we really heard from you what you felt those were.
Well, the safety concerns with the gravel road, a lot of it would be pedestrian access. You know, there's a fair amount of kids that walk and bike there now, or they take Aspen Boulevard, which isn't any safer than taking this gravel. I would suspect that would increase with the new elementary school. Same with traffic. You know, you're not just going to have Brandon traffic, but you're also going to have residents from Valley Springs coming to drop their kids off and going in. Do you want to answer it? Got it? Hello? And then unmute it. There you go.
Hello? Yeah, this is Jack. I guess I was trying to hit the mute button, but
One thing to note is, like, in 2019, it was a very wet year, but there was a semi that got stuck way up to its axle along Redwood.
So there's been discussion of this probably being inevitable eventually. So just playing devil's advocate, what what ideas might you have in more of a phased approach, if any? I don't know if you've put thought into that.
The water is there. There's a 16-inch main in Redwood and a 12-inch main in Chestnut. So as far as development and getting water to the school, that's there. Sewer, there's a portion of TB&J's land that would not be able to be serviced from that east side sewer. Obviously, if you make it deep enough, then it could be. We have not seen a concept plan from TB&J, but the area kind of that they're talking about commercial probably would not be sewerable until we put that sewer in Redwood. You know, if you did that phase of it, put the utilities in, you could do some grading work, and maybe put that shared use path in yet. We do have some drainage issues there that we could work through. It just kind of brings the overall cost up.
Yes.
One question. If and when the school is developed out there, Bill, you're going to rely on Chestnut Trail, one road in and out.
I haven't seen any plans, so
So Lynn must have an idea.
I'm assuming they might be able to go out to the south also.
So there has not been any concept plans submitted to the city as of yet. There has been some discussions. Chestnut Trail is really the only way to do that right now. We do have Sunshine Boulevard, Boulevard that dead ends, but that would have to go across another property. So at this time, I don't think that that one's feasible.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
So my other question is, understanding of this taxation thing you're talking about doing the special assessments, the realtors I've talked to say that I am going to get like zero, if any, benefit to having a more sufficient road, as you call it, to it. So I think that city council would be naive to think that half of this, even if you tried to force this on us, is going to get paid by the residents out there. So I think the more cost is more like 85 to 95% is going to be on the city. I just want people to realize that. That's more than likely what's going to happen. I know that people will fight you tooth and nail if you try to proceed with this. The other thing is, if you have these developers that want to do that, I am all for anybody or any of us that try to split our property up in any shape or form, that want to develop, sock it to them. You guys do have jurisdiction within 3 miles of the city limits. Is that not correct?
That is correct. Mayor, could I ask that you have them come up to the podium and state their name and address?
Sure. My name is Matthew Helgeson at 2300 East Oak Hill Circle. So I guess my question is, can you not force those people that want to develop into paying for the vast majority of this? They want this. We keep talking about this TB&J. You realize that none of those people even live in this county. They don't live in this town. They're not even part of this. A couple of them live in Arizona, and I don't know where the other one lives. So I'm like, we seem to be talking about them and their needs, and I don't really frankly understand. I understand the city wants to have growth. There are 4 different directions for the city to grow in. We're limited by the interstate over on that side of town, so there's not even, you're talking about some of these farms and these people, there's just not much that growth that can go that way. No one talks about the other directions of the city. There's land right across from the golf course for sale. Why aren't we talking about developing over there? And Dr. Larson wants land from the school. Well, the school district can buy 5 or 10 acres. I mean, that's the thing that gets put on every taxpayer in this entire school district, which is fair and equitable. I don't have a problem helping pay for that. And I know the school bought the city, maybe proposed on a study that a few of you counselors signed off 10 years ago, and it's just a thought or a process, but I don't know why we need to keep going down that path. The school had to sell that stuff for future development to someone else if they want to develop it. If the city wants to grow that way, great, but hit those people up. I have no way of developing my land whatsoever, nor would I want to. That's not what I bought it for. If I even thought that I was going to get annexed in, I mean, I talked to people on the city, people before when I first bought it. They just said this is just never going to happen. I would have never bought it. I would have bought in Sioux Falls. I work in Sioux Falls. I love my school district, but people have to think that growth is not necessarily great. We talk about our wonderful school, right? Well, at some point, this school district gets too big. It basically turns into a school. I don't think people want that. We're losing our small town identity. We do not need to keep growing. Growth is not always progress. Every time there's growth, there's pains. At a certain critical mass, it's more pain than there is benefit. I just want everyone to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Jess Ellefson, 1104 North Chestnut. I'm actually the farthest north property of anybody here. The Ellefson family has owned that section for 144 years. If the city, let's just put it to rest, like as long as I'm alive, we're never selling land. And my son feels the same way. So why we're even on this annexation study is absurd. It is. Like, come and talk to us. I don't care about the money. That is not what it's about. My grandfather died in my arms in that field. If anybody thinks they're taking it for any amount of money, they're crazy. And that is our livelihood. You're even you're taking my house, trying to annex our farm. You left Spencer alone. How do you bypass a property and then try to come and get us? You left a little tiny square out. Like, what is that? Yeah.
Spencer's house is this 920 right here.
Okay.
See that?
Yep.
Not annexed.
There, the Ellison's lot is this whole area here. And the only reason that they were put into the study was because of the intersection.
That one little corner, okay.
That's why they're not in. We're bringing those utilities and that street construction on this one.
And we were not assessed anything, but we are definitely not for annexation at any point now, ever in the future. I am the 6th generation to be on that farm. My son lives there now, and he is the 7th, and, you know, he will be the 8th. There's no reason to come past us, the interstate. We're up against the interstate. There's no need to come get me, because there's nothing to get on the other side of me. And the land that's to the west is undevelopable, and everybody knows it. Like, there's nothing up there, you know. And you have caused my mother and father great distress. You know, this is not what they need at their age. They're trying to enjoy retirement, and they're getting harassed, telling them, you know, the city, come and take your goddamn farm, because that's what that is. Sorry, I know. A little passionate. You know, not for it. And nobody on the north side of Chestnut is.
I think we've heard that loud and clear over the last several meetings, and I think at this point, it's in the council's hands. I've given you my recommendation, and I guess at this point, if it's something new, fine, but I mean, I'll be honest with you, if it's not, I think
it's productive. I'm not trying to be disruptive. So David Rezak, 301 Chestnut. So Congress just passed this monster infrastructure bill with $1 trillion. That money's coming. And the state's going to get, my understanding is billions of dollars that they're going to need infrastructure. What's that? 1.9. That they'll be looking for projects. That could be the money. That could be the source. The township could work with the school district, township and school district work together, get the township the money, and the township pays it. Problem solved. You don't annex anybody, you don't pay a penny. But if you charge ahead with this, you could look back in 2 years and go, that was the dumbest thing we've ever done. If we'd have just waited a year, it'd have been free. Because Governor Noem's looking for somewhere to spend this gobs of money that she gets piled on her. I don't know, whatever, it's done, it's passed, the Congress did it. So just consider that. I mean, that money might be right around the corner. And everybody's problem solved, no one spends any money.
Okay, I have a question to that then. So Brian, let's say, I don't know how it works with the township, But if for some reason, what if the city gets money or maybe more money than the township? Is there a way that we could then in turn help out the township? Or, you know what I'm saying? And then the other question I have then, let's say if we have to annex, is there a way that you can still grandfather the properties, like you talked about animals? Is there a way that we could still allow him to, as archery or shooting or whatever he was, I mean, is there a way that you could still, through this process, if we get, I mean, but still allow them to, some of their freedoms, so to speak?
The animals are one thing, you know, the Planning and Zoning Commission can always amend the zoning code, as we've been doing from time to time, that would allow animal production. As far as the hunting, I don't know, to single out specific properties that are exempt from the rules, the ordinances, I don't think you could do that. That'd be very difficult to do. As far as the infrastructure money goes, yeah, there's supposedly a lot of money coming in, but we have seen nothing about how that's going to be distributed, who's going to be eligible for it. So at this point in time, that would be conjecture. We're always looking at it, waiting for something, for some guidance. It's just like the $600 million in ARPA funding that the state got. Everybody thought that was going to be this great problem-solving issue for water and sewer. It's not. There are so many restrictions for us to use it, and even how much money we can get. It's not a wonderful program. So as far as the infrastructure money goes, we'll take a look at it, but I'm not going to count my chickens right at the moment because we have no details.
So I just want to circle back for a second to the Ellison's property, because I do agree that that's farther north than what we're looking at. You know, with this money discussion and keeping the conversation going, I guess I'm going to make a motion that we at least accept the study minus the Ellison's property and at least keep it open and see what's going to happen with the money.
We're on the north side of the road there.
Wait,
We gotta go through the process.
Yeah.
So,
is that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
Second for discussion.
Now, right now, please, we're discussing, thank you.
So help me understand this, Brian. CCOG did a study, right? It's like any other study that we've have done, whether it's to water, whether it's sewer, whether it's whatever study. Why would we accept or unaccept a study that's being done? I mean, what's the benefit to not accepting a study? I mean, it's simply a study. It doesn't say we're doing anything.
Correct, it's a study. The difference is if you don't accept the study, then in my mind anyway, the process is done. I don't think you want to move forward if you don't accept the study.
So if we don't accept the study, we're not out anything, it doesn't cost us anything, it's not.
Correct.
Okay.
On the flip side, if we don't accept the study and we get a lot of money and we decide, hey, this is the opportunity that we've been looking for, but then we're out.
I think, Danny, you got to be really careful on thinking you're going to get a lot of money.
I'm just saying leave the door open.
That's not going to happen.
No, I'm just saying leave the door open
I
and
think
be
the
able
door
to take.
is open, but I think the door is open based upon, first of all, you know, and I'm not even sure I'm supposed to say this, but we can't prove that we're enhancing the value of their land. That's the first thing in an assessment that you have to be able to do. We can't do that. We'd lose. If we want to go to, and no one wants to go to court, I don't want to put them through it. I've gotten enough attorney letters already. I think it's got to stop. I think these folks are spending a lot of money. I think the longer we prolong this, the more agitated and more unrest we're causing. I think a decision has got to be made. And now, if you think we can afford this as a city, and we need more time to figure out how to afford this as a city, that's another thing. But that doesn't mean we have to accept this annexation study as it is, in my eyes. The decision has got to be made about that. Where we might get other monies, that's certainly something that we can do.
and again, I have to come back and just say that this is something that will be driven by development later on. If we continue down this road, all we're gonna do is cause a lot of aggravation for a lot of people out here. We're gonna cause a lot of aggravation for staff, and we're gonna cause a lot of aggravation for this. This is not, I just don't see this happening at this time. I don't, and it's not kicking the can down the road. We just, in a sense, we don't have the can to kick. That will come along later on. And I think that there's probably, with the township, if there's money out there that's gonna go to infrastructure, I think the township could probably improve that road much cheaper than we can. And without forcing everybody to come into the city and pay our taxes and take our water and use our sewer, what they don't want. And to continue this beyond tonight at this point. Now, if a year or two down the road, the need is more articulated, perhaps, then we're gonna have to cross that bridge then. But at this point, I just don't see the driving need. The driving need was the school. The school has said, if we get this much road up to our entrance, they're gonna build the school. Tim talked to them. I asked the question last time. That was the driving force, was the school. Are there traffic risks out there? Yeah, perhaps there are some traffic risks. I don't know of too many real serious accidents out there, and I did that police chief thing for about 11 years. And we would respond to those kind of accidents. I know that there were some vehicles that slid into the ditch on occasion. That happens out on Maple also. We've gone up on those. It's just the nature of the beast with those roads. I think the road will eventually get improved. Hopefully it's something that the township, working with residents, working with grant money, can accomplish without us causing a lot of grief to people that don't want it. And causing a lot of grief to us, and then add to that the legal bills that we would face if this started going into court. And I agree wholeheartedly with, as far as the costs go, values and things like that, we would be sitting at about 85, the developable land, those assessments would probably hold on. So we're not gonna get the whole bill, but we would get a large chunk of it. And I just don't see any reason why we need to beat this dead horse.
Do you believe, Dennis, that not annexing this particular area that we're speaking about on Redwood and Chestnut will stop the whole project? Do you believe it'll stop the school? Do you believe it'll stop the development?
I don't know what I believe at this point, Mayor. I just believe that there's significant safety concerns. I believe that we should accept a study. I'm not saying, I absolutely do not agree with the assessed numbers in the study. I think the city should pay a lot more share, and I think we owe at least looking at that and seeing if there is a way to do that. I have concerns with growth being inhibited. I have concerns with safety on Redwood, like Vicki mentioned, even a fire truck going, if it's a rainy day and a fire truck needs to go down that road, I guess I don't want to look back and be responsible for a death that we could have prohibited. I just think it deserves more than one meeting, and I think we need to leave it open, just accept the study, not saying we annex. That is not what the motion is for. The motion is not to charge people the amounts in the study. It's just to accept the information and continue the discussion.
Dave, I have a question. So, or Brian, maybe it's you. So I know Dave mentioned this a couple times. If we can, from where Chestnut ends, that's where city of limits end, right? Pavement. So then that 300 feet, how do we obtain that, or how do we pave that? We don't, the township will do it?
Well, they could. It's outside of our jurisdiction. It's up to the city council whether or not you want to spend money outside of your jurisdiction.
That doesn't mean we couldn't help.
So, Brian, if we do not accept the study, will it still go in our official minutes? Because I don't really want to be responsible for people coming back and saying, oh, you never looked at this. I would want it in our minutes. So if
It would
we,
certainly be in the minutes, a motion.
even if
not-
we don't accept it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be in a motion that's recorded.
You know, I also know that the city of Sioux Falls has looked at this forced annexation with several subdivisions. Now, most of those subdivisions, they have literally grown all the way around. I believe a former mayor used to call them donuts within the city, so that they were literally completely surrounded by the city of Sioux Falls, which is why they went to try to annex them. I got friends in Pine Lake Hills and Mystic Meadows, and I got friends in a development across from Target. Every one of those has been approached by the city of Sioux Falls for annexation. They will be more forceful once they're completely surrounded. They have all resisted annexation on, mostly because of the assessments that the city wants to put on them in Sioux Falls. They, you know, a friend of mine, it was going to be $180,000 to build the road and put in water and sewer in their house. So they also don't want annexation. And really, from a city standpoint, we don't necessarily like doing forced annexations because we like it when people want to bring their property in an annex. That's what developers typically do. That's what people typically do. We don't typically do forced annexations. I would also like to remind the council that I asked a question earlier this year, and we couldn't even ask the question to get information. This study is officially more than I got when I asked a question earlier this year.
Oops.
Hey, Aaron Hansen, 405 Chestnut Trail. Just a couple of thoughts, guys. You talked about the potential of having 3 properties along the eastern side to be able to be annexed in, right? That's still a valid option. It's also an option that if you didn't force it, they could petition in. That's still on the table, right? The school and those 2 properties could petition their way into the city. Exactly. And they wouldn't have to even be contiguous if they're petitioning, if my understanding is correct. No? They do? Okay. So they could petition in. And as far as the road goes, you know, we spoke to Dr. Larson a little bit too, as some of you guys did, and the school had said that they were willing to take up the cost, even potentially, for that road extension to get it to where they need to for the entrance. Likewise, the sidewalk that's there from a safety concern perspective, there are really wide bike path shared use that goes all the way to the top of the hill on Chestnut already. That could also be extended to the school entrance. Most of the traffic that's going to be walking into the school is going to be coming out of the neighborhoods there. It's not going to be coming from North Oak Ridge, coming up the gravel road and around. A lot of it's going to be from that side of town or bust in from Valley Springs when that school shuts down. So I think a lot of the things that are being talked about, we have ways to address without going at these things. You know, nobody here is just sticking their feet down for the purposes of being stubborn about it. We want to see some of these things happen too, but there needs to be natural, reasonable growth for it. And I think we've got some options to do that. Like you said, whether it's the township, the school, the city, all going together to fight for some funds and get some of these things done. As David asked, you know, if the roads were put in and there was 0 cost, would anybody be opposed to the roads? No, but there are other regulatory concerns and stuff there yet too. I think there are definitely ways that we can work together on this, but it's too early. I mean, we need to work out a lot of details to be able to get some of these things done, and there's nothing standing in the way of the school accomplishing the goals that it needs to at this point.
Thank you. So at this point, we have a motion to accept the study.
Oh, it's my plan, right? Is that what you did?
Yeah, do we have a second on it?
We do not.
Yeah, I seconded it for
Oh.
discussion, that's why we could talk,
Okay, I'm sorry.
right? Because I had to do that.
You did, okay.
Okay, I didn't hear you either.
Yep.
Further discussion? I think we've, one more.
I'm playing lawyer here. Because I am a lawyer.
That's scary.
Try not to hold that against you. I don't know what. This is David Rezak. David Rezak, 301.
David Resack?
He's a resident.
Okay.
Procedurally, I don't know what acceptance means. Like, there's nothing in the statutes, and I don't know why maybe Lisa could speak up. There's nothing in the statutes that says
There's
accept
nothing in the
or
statutes
don't
about
accept.
accepting
This
the
is like,
study.
it's like a meaningless thing that you're doing that's making everyone here panic.
It's a procedural issue.
But there's no procedural
The
requirement to
council doesn't
accept.
have to accept the study if they don't want
It's-
to.
It's meaningless, I think. But legally speaking, is it
Legally
meaningless?
speaking, it's meaningless.
So that's, you're making us all panic, but you're trying to, and I don't know what for.
So there's no requirement that, we have too many people there. There's no requirement that council accept the study. There's requirement that the council does a study in order to do the next step of a notice of intent. You've done a study, so there's nothing to say.
There's nothing to say somebody could not, even if you don't accept the study, there's nothing to say that you guys could not put a notice of intent on a city council agenda 3 months from now, because you don't have to accept the study in order to do annexation. I think what Brian was wanting, because we just talked about this right before Mr. Rezak came up, Brian would like some direction. If you guys don't want to go forward, that's what he was going to interpret the not accepting the study to mean. We're done, we're not going to go through with the next step of a notice of intent. And that's what he's going to use it for.
And that's what I think I was asking earlier. I think the question to me is, do we want to annex this area of ground based upon the information that we have and the costs that are going to be incurred? Do we want to do that or not? I don't think anyone is saying we should stop looking at what's going to be done out there. I'm not in favor of the annexation, but I'm not saying that we stop looking at the development area, the school, around the school. If somehow the Redwood to Chestnut on the north side of Redwood could be eliminated, and the south side that's already developed up to Chestnut, I think that other area is certainly going to be very valuable city streets and homes at some point in time, but I just think we're prolonging aggravation by continuing to even look at this point. And that's what again, I hope there's not confusion between accepting the study and the continuation of looking at this property, because I think those are two entirely different things.
So if you accept the study or you don't accept the study, somebody can put a notice of intent on the agenda to have you go the next step. And that's really what I think your administration is wanting is, are you wanting to go to the next step and do a notice of intent? The study is a study, it's in our record, we have it. You can use it for, I would say, a reasonable period of time. If there's changes, then you're gonna have to do another study. So we have the motion to accept it. It's really, the question is, do you want to do the next thing of pursuing annexation with a notice of intent, which you lay a bunch more stuff out when you do the.
So you would interpret if the council voted yes to accepting the study to move forward. Is that what you're telling that staff is looking
No,
for?
it's, all of the studies that we've done, whether it's the water source study, the
Yep.
water system study, have always been accepted by the council. Upon presentation to the council, there's always been a motion to accept the study. Just like the audits. There's a motion by the council to accept the audit, that you officially recognize that the study's been completed and done. Now, if you accept the study, it doesn't mean that we're gonna move forward with the annexation. There's all kinds of questions yet that need to be answered and studied. Is there cooperation with the township? What's the county think? Because ultimately, the county has some say in part of the properties that are in the annexation area, whether or not they get annexed or not. You need the county commission to approve that. So if you don't, in my mind, if you don't accept the study, it's done. It's not saying that we can't resurrect it in the future, but you've made a statement to the public that the annexation is done, that we aren't going to do it. If you accept the study, it doesn't mean that we're going to proceed with it. At some point in time, there needs to be an intent, a resolution of intent for annexation.
Could that intent be like 6 months from now?
Yep.
Like what David said, like this may be a moot point. We might so just because we accept it tonight, we might just all just be like, all right, let's not even worry about it right now, and maybe we never worry about it again, but we're just saying, the study was done, we hear what they have to say.
And like Lisa said, there is a shelf life to the study.
Yeah.
You can't accept it tonight and then 5 years from now or 10 years from now decide, hey, we're gonna take action on that study.
Yeah,
I think the shelf life on this study is fairly short,
yeah.
a year maybe, 18 months at the most.
And I don't want to remind people that if you're proceeding with a notice of intent, there are public notices that you have to give to the residents. So they have to get that notice of intent, and there'll be a public meeting. So in the event you accept the study, nothing is done for 3 months, and then somebody says, well, okay, XYZ happened, let's talk about it. They all get the notice of intent, we set a hearing, and we go through it at some point. I mean, I think everybody knows if you don't go forward with it tonight, it doesn't mean it's not going to happen at some point. What's that point? Is it 3 months from now? They get notice of the notice of intent. Is it 18 months from now? Maybe you have to do another study.
I guess I'm just curious why we're just not following our protocol that we have with all of our other studies. I don't get a sense up here that anybody is interested in filing a intent. I don't get that at all. But I don't know why we can't accept the study like we have every other study. I guess that's my question. I mean, why wouldn't we accept it?
If we want to, it's, the study is here. We've all seen it. And, but if we want to end this tonight, and I think the people that we're looking at out here would probably appreciate that because they don't have this vision of this sword hanging from a string above them and could drop at any time. When you say something like, well, yeah, we can drop it for now and then maybe we can sneak back and, that's what they're thinking. You can sneak back and reintroduce this 3 months from now, 6 months from now. I have absolutely no interest in talking about this beyond tonight. I would like to see this ended tonight. And I think that's what that's my...
But I think Lisa said we could revisit it even if we didn't accept it, right? So.
And I think they realize that, but as far as this goes, I think we've worn out our welcome on this particular topic.
Okay, at this point, we do have a motion and a second. I think we've discussed whether or not we accept the report is what we're voting on. We're not voting on anything other than that. But I do believe we have to vote on that. And that doesn't mean that we can't still make a decision that, in my eyes, that this, tonight, we could make a decision on whether or not we want to go forward with this, correct? Right. So, let's get to the first part first. Brian, is this a roll call, please?
Yeah. Jack's on the phone, so it needs to be.
Okay.
Clark?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Jorgensen?
Nay.
Call?
Nay.
Parliament?
Aye.
4-2, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So the
Motion
report
passed.
is accepted and placed into the files, so to speak.
So I would make a motion that we are not, I don't know exactly how to word it, but we are not interested in moving forward with a letter of intent. I have, a what? Resolution of intent. I have no interest in doing that. I merely did the report because that's protocol.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to not move forward with any intent, our resolution, I should say, of intent to annex. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote on a resolution of intent to annex. Not in.
It's kind of bad.
I'm confused up here, but anyway.
You're confused, I want to make sure we put it all.
So they're saying
We're-
this time, right?
This time, we're not.
We're not resolution of intent, no. Okay. Clerk.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Jorgensen. Aye. Call. Aye. Hardeman. Aye. Motion passed.
So motion passes that there is no intent, resolution of intent to annex. That's it? Motion and second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.